Okay, cool. We're going to go ahead and get started with this plenary session, the final plenary session of this year's code. I know a lot of us are sort of a little bit behind coming back from the parallel sessions, but we want to go ahead and get started. I think this session is nice in that we're going to hear about some real concrete, interesting digital field experiments. So sometimes, at this point in code especially, if somebody hits you with another page full of equations, it's not clear that it goes anywhere. So, I think it's really great to hear about some cool field experiments. So I want to just go ahead and introduce our first speaker in this session, Chen from University of Michigan. Let's welcome Jan.
All right, thank you very much for having me. No, I think it's the wrong slides. Okay. All right, thank you. So I'm going to present an experiment that's joint with our PhD student, Jueyu, who's sitting right there, who led the experiment when she was a first-year PhD student, and my colleague, Alain Cohn and Al Roth from Stanford. So the motivation was fairly simple. So social media is used by academics to promote their own and others' research. They're used by job market candidates. I'm going to use the term Twitter, even though it has changed its name, to advertise their job markets. And lots of advisors and placement officers are also on social media promoting their job market candidates. We also know a fair amount of empirical work which correlates social media exposure with citation counts. But the causal impact of social media promotion on academic success is not well established. So there are all sorts of confounders. We're going to go ahead and do this. The second motivation is to look at underrepresented groups in academia. In this specific case, I have some data on women in economics. So if you look at the leftmost grid, you get 1994. So the bottom red line is the proportion of women who are full professors, among the full professors in the top 100 PhD granting economics departments. And it was about 7% in 94. And then you have the associate professors and the full professors. The trend is increasing, so we have data up to 2024, but they're still underrepresented. So this is also reflected in our design. We have now a fair amount of evidence that women face systematic disadvantages in economics and STEM field. They're held to a higher bar by referees, and they have fewer publications in top journals and less recognition in co-authored articles. So these are really well-conducted empirical studies using observational data. And women and ethnic minorities face even higher barriers. So using publicly available data, we know that about 1% of the academic talks in economics are given by underrepresented minorities who make up 8% of the econ faculty. Furthermore, women actually self-promote less in male-type domains and also on social media. So we have two very simple research questions. The first one is whether social media promotion can improve job market outcomes for job market candidates. The second one is whether it particularly benefits underrepresented groups. So in our randomization, both are taken into consideration. Okay. So here's an overview. And in presenting this experiment, I want to be frank about what didn't go as expected, because in running field experiments, I'm sure lots of people have this experience that you have a nice design, and when you actually implement it, all sorts of things can go wrong. So this experiment was conducted on Twitter during the 22-23 econ job market season. So for those of you who are not from economics, The Economist actually organized their own markets in a fairly structured way. And the idea is to increase the visibility of job market candidates through quote tweets by prominent economists on Twitter. So the design and analysis were pre-registered at the AERCT registry. So the first part is about our power analysis. Based on standard power analysis, we anticipate to recruit 800 participants, so we did not reach this target, okay? But the study is approved by the IRB, and here is an overview of the preparation, the pre-market survey, intervention, and post-market survey, the stages of the experiment. So I'm going to go through each of these stages in a fair amount of detail. So the subject pool was the job market candidates on the basically North America and European market. So the total sample size was 2,700. The demand, that was a very good year in the sense that demand exceeded supply. So the demand was 3,600 jobs, full-time jobs, including academic jobs, about 1,000 in and outside the US. The supply was about 1,386 PhD students and postdocs who applied through the JO. So we have the official report. So what we did was to create a Twitter account called Econ Job Market Helpers. And after we created the account, we invite our friends and colleagues to follow. So it had about 2,000 followers, which is well above the 85th percentile. Our estimate is it's above the 90th percentile. And then what we did was to invite 250 economist influencers with more than 4,000 followers. So we use 4,000 as a cutoff, as to define the influencers. 80 of them said yes. Okay, so this is our universe of influencers. So who are these people? Here's a scatter plot of their Twitter follower account and the influencer citation account. So the average number of followers was 20,000, almost 21,000, and the average Google Scholar citations was 21,000. So these are really leaders in our field in different areas in economics. So then the first stage is to conduct a pre-market survey. So we ask about their academic background, their demographics, and what's unusual is we ask each job market candidate to summarize their job market paper as a tweet. And we provide them with guidelines about what's a good tweet and parameters. So what is the benefit from participation? They get to participate in a virtual workshop on job market preparation. And we posted every job market tweet on Econ Job Market Helpers. I also want to point out that at this point, the number becomes 590. Okay, think about the entire market, which is 2,700 roughly. Then we use stratified random assignment. At this point, it shrank to 515. And the reason is some job market candidates did not have their job market paper on their website. So we want the influencers to be able to actually read it before quote tweet their paper. So for those of you who are on the job market, definitely have your papers on your website and make sure it's searchable. In the design, we use what's a matched triplet design, which is a generalization of the matched pair design characterized by Bai. It's efficient. So a canonical example of the matched pair design is the Bertrand-Muller-Nathan audit study, right? So you have identical resumes with, a typical white-sounding and a typical black-sounding name. So in this case, what we did is we stratify the job candidates by whether they are a member of the underrepresented group, whether they're in a top 30 institution. This is actually top 60. It's top 30 in the US and top 30 outside the US. And then within each stratum, we sort them by their advisor's Google Scholar citation. So within each stratum, we form triplets. And if you are an underrepresented group, you are randomly assigned to the treatment with probability 2/3. And if you're from the none, you're randomly assigned to treatment with probability 1/3. So it advantages the people from the underrepresented group. So what did we do to people in the treatment group? So we post every participant's job market paper tweet from our research account, which has more than 2,000 followers. In the treatment group, we match them with an influencer in their field based on the cosine similarity of abstracts. So which means that we take your job market paper abstract, and we take each influencer's top 20 most cited paper abstract. So we have 2 bags of words. Then we compute the cosine similarity. For each job candidate, we computed 80 cosine similarity scores, and we used the max. Okay, and that's how we match them. And we did some manual adjustments afterwards to make sure that it's a good match. So the influencer quote tweeted job market paper tweets. You use customizable templates. So they would receive an email with a URL, which they can click to go to their Twitter account. And there is a template there, which is meant to be neutral. And they can just post that template or customize it. I'll show you an example. So on average, each influencer quote tweeted 3 job market candidates, and that's spread out over 10 days. The compliance rate was 88%, which is fairly high, and which means that the intent to treat effect is very similar to the local average treatment effect. So what I'm going to present today, because I don't have a lot of time, is just to present the ITT, and all the late estimates are in the appendix. And the paper can be downloaded from SSRN. Okay. So here's a fictitious example. Here's me quote tweeting Jingyi's paper. She was not a job market candidate. That year, she's not yet. And I wasn't one of the influencers. But this is one of the templates. Retweeting a job market paper on curiosity from, this is our research account, to help publicize job market candidates in my field. So this is about publicizing their work without promoting their work, okay? And all the templates are meant to be neutral. We also did a text analysis afterwards to see what the actual quote tweet is, okay? Any questions about the design? Okay. Then we sent out the post-market survey in May, and this is about the outcomes that we really care about, so which is the number of interviews, flyouts, offers, salaries, and placement satisfaction. We give them a $10 Amazon gift card award, which is unconditional. The response rate was 80%. So when we report the results, we have the pre-survey sample and the post-survey sample separately, okay? All right, so they're roughly balanced in the post-survey sample. We also collected Twitter metrics. So here's a rough overview of our pre-market survey sample. So among the 500 participants, there are 18% US citizens, 70% of them had a Twitter account, and 46% are from top 30 institutions. So this makes us think that our sample is not really representative. What's more is there, almost 60% had one publication or R&R, which in economics is quite unusual. Underrepresented groups are 43% of the sample, including women, Blacks, Hispanic, American Indian or Alaska Native, LGBTQ, and so on. And one question is, who are the non-URGs? They are Asian white men who identify as heterosexual. Okay. So very similar demographics to the AEA survey, except that our US citizen proportion was lower. Theirs was 30% because we also had the European job market. Okay. So here's the estimation strategy. We always control for URG status because our random assignment was unbalanced. So I'm going to present a set of results. I also want to say ahead of time that I have a slide on the ethics of this experiment. And I'll make sure to discuss it. So in terms of visibility and engagement, the control group had 952 views and 4 likes. So this is the like. What you see here is, here's the pre-market, and here's the post-market sample. And when we report the results, the first one is with no controls. Here's controls for personal background, and here's controls for everything, okay? In short, the effect size is huge, okay? I think this is part of the reason that it caused an uproar on Twitter when the working paper was posted for the first time. So the job market tweet, the treatment group received 4,000 more views and 12 more likes. So the effect size was about 400% or 300% on Twitter than those of the control group. So the views are somewhat passive, so I don't have complete control over what I see, but the likes are proactive. You have to proactively like a tweet or quote tweet, okay. So this is huge, and now we look at the interviews. So for those of you who are not on the econ or hasn't been on the econ job market, you get a ASSA interview, which that year was on Zoom, and then there's an on-campus visit, and then offers are being made. So just in terms of the proportion, when we post a position on econ, the econ market, we get roughly 300 applications. Out of these 300, we select 25 for conference or Zoom interviews, and then we select about 4 to 5 for flyouts, okay? So in the control group, people receive 16 interviews, and of these, 11 of them are tenure track interviews. And then let's take a look at the treatment group. So here's 0, and you look at the treatment group for both all jobs and tenure track jobs. It's in the right direction, but there's no effect, okay? And the caveat is that the interview process actually were issued earlier than the previous 2 cycles. So the 2020 job market was normal. It was in San Diego, it was in person. 2021 was the first virtual job market, where the interviews went online, and most departments followed the timeline of the 2020, the normal interview time. By 2022, the market started to unravel. So if you go to econjobmarket.org, you have the CDF of the timing of when the interviews were issued. You can see the unraveling of the market in that year, so which we didn't anticipate. So that's one of the issues. So no effect, okay? And then we look at flyouts. The control group on average, so these are campus visits, had 5.4 flyouts. 3.4 of these are for tenure track positions. The treatment group has 1 more flyouts. So if you look at the one with control, which is more precise, they have 1 more flyouts than the control group. So what is the effect size? Is it, comparable to, is this big or small? It roughly is equivalent to having 1 more publication. Okay, so the effect size is pretty large. The third one that we care about is job offers. So the control group on average got 3 offers. 1.6 of them are tenure track positions. And the treatment group got 0.4 marginally more job offers than the control group. So it's a sort of relatively weak result. But what we do have is a heterogeneous treatment effect by gender. So women in the control group got 3.1 job offers and 2 tenure track offers of these. Women in the treatment group, women in the treatment group got 0.9 more offers. So basically 1 more job. Okay, if you look at the treatment, the time plus the interaction group, okay. So if you look at all jobs here, the treatment dummy plus this, the interaction, that's 0.9, okay. So there is a significant treatment effect on job offers by gender. So that's the main results. And when you present field experiments, I don't know whether other people encounter this, sometimes people in the audience, after seeing all the results, they would say, oh, it's obvious. I could have told you you don't need to run the experiment. So to prevent that, we also want to see how obvious the result is. We ask, and by the way, this is a public resource. We asked the social science prediction platform, which runs out of Berkeley. We recruited 73 experts and asked them to predict the effect size. And we also asked our 80 influencers. Of these, 31 of them actually returned our prediction. So these are incentivized, by the way. So the most accurate predictors in each sample were given a $100 Amazon gift card. So the question was actually asking about late. So it's by what percentage did treated job market candidates receive more interviews, flyouts, and job offers on average? And the red dotted line are the ground truths. That's the late estimate. And the green bars are the influencers. These are the senior people in the field, the leaders of the field. And the blue ones are the SSPP experts who tend to be early career economists. They're senior graduate students, postdocs, and so on. So one characteristics is that everybody predicted monotone decline. And the other characteristics is the influencers are much more conservative than the SSPP experts for every outcome. But they were off by basically where the maximum effect is, which is it's in flyouts. So the actual effect is actually not monotone. Okay, so it's not completely obvious. So let me summarize. I have 4 minutes left. Okay, summarize the pre-registered analysis. So what we looked at is so the effect of social media promotion of the type, by experts in your field, has a huge effect on visibility, on the views and likes on Twitter. The treatment group got 1 more flyouts and 0.4 marginally more job offers. And women in the treatment group got essentially 1 more job offer than those in the control group. Okay, so that's the main pre-registered results. We also looked at the mechanism. So these analyses are not pre-registered. So we look at what's driving the results. So we look at increased attention, potential, implied endorsement by looking at the text analysis of what they actually quote tweeted. And also whether job market candidates are just more confident. Let's say a behavioral economist, junior economist, whose job market paper was quote tweeted by Stefano Della Vigna might be just more confident on the job market. There are lots of analysis which I won't have time to present, but I'm going to summarize the mechanisms. So it turns out that the signal credibility matters more than the content. So sharing by highly cited scholars, so we did a median cut of these 80 scholars, above or below median. They're all highly cited, but the above median people are more highly cited. Then enthusiastic language, and also candidates from top institutions actually benefited more from the promotion. What are the mechanisms? So the academic reputation seems like a quality signal. So who shares matters more than what they say. So in other words, if you're on the job market and if your advisor is highly influential and also is a highly cited scholar, ask them to quote tweet you on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, whatever social media they're on. And so I promised to talk about the ethics. So I mentioned that the paper went viral on Twitter after Jingyi posted the paper on SSRN. We went through a lot of the critiques on Twitter. There are also positive comments. Actually, more substantive comments are more positive. So they actually read the paper. I didn't say that people who didn't like the paper didn't read the paper, but so there are two clusters of critiques. One is we didn't inform the participants that they will be randomized into a treatment and a control group. And so what we did when they signed the informed consent, we say that we're interested in studying, social media promotion on job market outcomes, and if you agree to participate, here are some benefits for participating. We did not mention that you will be randomized into treatment or control group. It was a choice. We could have said, half of you will be randomized into a treatment, and this is what's going to happen. The other half will be in the control condition. The reason we didn't say that was because we thought it might alter people's behavior. So in the field experiment lingo, it's called a natural field experiment. And most of the experiments in development actually fall into this category. So like it or not, this is what we did. The second argument is that the job market is a zero-sum game. Therefore, if we, about 20% of the market participated in the experiment. So if we randomly promote half of the candidates, it necessarily hurt the people in the control group and the people who didn't participate at all. So here are some counter-arguments. I'm not saying that I necessarily buy all these counter-arguments. So first, quote tweeting a tweet about publicly available research doesn't require consent itself. And everything that was going on Twitter was still going on. So Jennifer Doliak was tweeting all of the women's job market papers. The market design group decided to quote tweet every job market design candidate's job market paper. The second point is that the control group also received benefits. The third argument is we're going to say that it's unlikely to be a zero-sum game. Why is that? If it's a complete information game, then yes, it is zero-sum. However, there are information frictions, and there are congestion on the matching market. So we only have 25 slots to interview, choosing from 300 applicants. There, everybody relies on signals. And what's more, I don't really know the likelihood that I can get my best candidates. So for this reason, the AEA actually has a scramble market, which is after the market clears at the end of February, at the beginning of March, a second round starts. Every year, there are positions which are not filled and candidates who didn't find positions, so they start a second round. And in that year, there was also a scramble. The third one is that there might be new positions being created. So if you're from Michigan, last week we just went through the presidential postdoc interviews. These are positions created by the UC system, initially by Michigan and Berkeley, to essentially diversify the faculty. So people from, unusual backgrounds are given 3-year postdocs, which are transitioned into tenure track with almost 100% probability. So there are new positions that one can ask for, the resources for those, and there should be better matches through signaling. Okay. So what are some of the limitations of the study? I think is, in the ways that it didn't go as anticipated, the underpowered, we didn't reach the target recruitment, and our timing was off because the market unraveled. These were all, in a way, unanticipated limitations. But there's also, right now we have the short-term effect. So we collected the survey within a year of the job market. And so we do have plan to follow up 5 years, 5 years down the road to see where these papers are published and look at people's career outcomes. But this is one example of, causally assessing the effect of social media promotion on career outcomes. I think that's all I have, and I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really interesting, and we'll have some chance for some questions shortly. So we'll just turn directly to our next plenary speaker and the last of this code, Sherry Wu from UCLA.
Okay. All right. Oh, clicker. All right, hi everybody, I'm Sherry Wu from UCLA Anderson School of Management. So today I'm going to present a project, a field experiment on participatory budgeting, which is pretty much still ongoing in different formats in China. So, hundreds of millions of dollars are spent every year on initiatives in developing countries to encourage people to engage in civic actions and political participation. Right? So for example, Gram Sabha is the General Assembly of everybody in the village in India. So people use the forum of Gram Sabha to discuss local governance and development and also make need-based plans for the village. Another domestic example is Seattle's participatory budgeting project, where people form committees to discuss and vote on how local community budgets are allocated. So there are many examples like these, where a group of people engage in a relatively long-term process in which influence and decision power is shared within a group. Okay? So like any other social system, there are upsides and downsides of participation. Right? So on the positive sides, particularly in the domain of budgeting, so it can increase budget efficiency and accountability. So basically, local citizens are the people who have the granularity of knowledge that local authorities might not have, right? So they know how to spend their money the most on the stuff that they are most in need. And it can also facilitate better information exchange between citizens and their authorities. And from the theory of procedural justice, that we know when we are asked for our voice and input, and it contributes to the collective decision making, it can increase our satisfaction level on the collective outcome, right? And there are also research showing even when the voice is not used in the collective, in the final decision outcome, the fact that you're asked for your input and voice can itself, sufficient to increase my local satisfaction on the decision outcomes. And on the downsides, there are no lack of downsides. It's costly in terms of money, right? Resource and coordination cost, and can lead to some loss of technical efficiency. And also in the environments where it is hierarchical, meaning there are dominant group and non-dominant groups, especially when the minority groups are in a marginalized position, it can often lead to local capture and sometimes even exacerbate pre-existing inequalities. And that is why I'm particularly excited about the digitalization of a lot of these participation platforms, which essentially mitigate the access barriers a lot of people are facing. Right? So technically, theoretically, if you have the access to the mobile phone and the internet, people know no matter where you live, rural or city, you're able to engage in participation, right, on different opinion sharing. So it really democratized a lot of the voice platforms with the digitalization at scale. So I'm a social psychologist by training. When looking at the previous literature on participation and also on community-driven development more globally, I think I see a gap. So we as scholars tend to study participation within a defined domain. So meaning, for example, if we are studying budgeting, we are really looking at the budgeting decision outcomes, right? So how are decisions made? How do we feel about the budgeting and the efficiencies and immediate outcome related to the defined domain of budgeting? But I'm curious to learn whether there are global effects going above and beyond budgeting. So meaning, can the experience of participation in this narrow budgeting domain translate into different psychological orientations about the social structure outside of the budgeting domain? So for example, how do we think about the global societal authority and justice? And if there were a global effect, is it always positive? So I like to get this causal inference using natural groups in the field. So some of the work from my prior research shows that doing sort of experimental field research with participatory groups show that when the experience of participation, group participation does increase worker productivity and workplace empowerment, the type of positive local effects as we often theorize. So it is summarized in this 2025 paper. But at the same time, perhaps the less expected finding is when we repeatedly practice having more authority within our local group structure, this immersive group experience also actually reduced my thoughts or people's trust in general authority and justice among Chinese factory workers. Now, many of you might think, okay, so it may only happen in China when people are not used to participate. But actually, we find conceptually replicated results among American workers as well. Summarized in this paper. And in addition, in some of the ongoing work, including the project I'm going to present today, so we found that when citizen groups engage in group deliberation about collective decision-making on the local budget, they also experience a lowered satisfaction level toward the global environment, which is the central government. I'm going to talk more about that. So this happens both in person and online. And why did it happen? So here's my proposition. So I think that participation in community groups are likely to make people feel more empowered, more skeptical of authority and their institutional structure. So many reasons, but potentially one of the count is through a change in people's comparison level. Okay, so let me give you an intuitive example. So here is a big circle with a gradient of blue. Okay, so think about it as a global environment. Now I add on a small dark blue circle in the middle, representing my global group, which all of a sudden make the big blue circle seem less blue, right? So I think the same idea can be applied to the perception of the groups and the surrounding social fabrics. So the framework I'm posing here is we are in a similar exchange relationship with our broader society as well. So my satisfaction of my global context is a function of the quality and inclusiveness of the societal context, and also my comparison level for what the society should be like. And the local group I'm embedded in really sets the tone for this comparison level, right? So by sort of engaging in this democratic participatory decision-making time after time, so it changed my comparison level, which made the global big circle here seem less blue. So the research question in this project are twofold. So for one, so we like to know, does participatory budgeting in this narrow budgeting domain, can it spill over to other more broad civic engagement actions? Right? For two, does it change people's attitudinal outcomes? Like how we think about the local governance, where people perceive the decision power is delegated from, and also the global government, which is the central government, where for a lot of people, where they do not perceive or experience the equal sense of participation power. Okay. Interesting, the left bit, which is the map. So it is not showing up, I don't know why, but we conducted this field experiment in the city of Chengdu, China. So the left, just imagine there's a map of China here. So Chengdu is the fourth largest city in China, located in central China, close to Tibet, and is commonly known as the home of Chinese pandas. Okay? So it has over 20 million registered residents. So population-wise, it's similar to the country Netherlands, and 3 times as big as Denmark. And the picture on the right is one of the communities, Zhouli Dibeilu community that we collect data in. So I've been working closely with an NGO, Social Equity and Participation Center in China for the past several years to pilot an experiment on participatory budgeting in different formats, both in person, and it was like traditionally all in person, but we moved it to online, and like fully online, I think starting in 2022. So for those of you who might not be familiar about the idea of participation, so this is a process in the city of Chengdu. It is actually an annual process through which the community budget is debated and prioritized by the citizens. So people form communities and discuss and talk about how to use the community budget, which was divided by the city government, right? So they use this community budget, decide how to spend it. They can, for example, choose to build a road, increase more green spaces, start a literary program, or a recreational dancing program for the elderly in the community. Okay? And it is intervention that is meant to invite more participation, where for the villagers and the city people, they democratically allocate and monitor the sort of project and funds that were spent on different programs. And one unique feature about this intervention is a complete locally driven process embedded in local political and administrative structures. So most of the sort of the community-driven projects in many developing countries are sponsored by international support, but this one is completely born from within. As mentioned, it is digitizing large scale, and we estimate over 20% people, like over 4 million people, have downloaded, logged in, and used our digital app frequently during the intervention period. So this flow chart illustrates the participatory budgeting process. So people use their local knowledge to suggest proposals to how to spend this money. And then they engage in a group deliberation process, both the online person, to discuss these proposals. And people vote on which proposals is the top priority. And in the end, the highly voted proposals were implemented by the government using vendors or contractors, and the citizens got the opportunity to sort of comment and monitor how these projects are implemented. And for this experiment, we focus on the first 3 steps, where basically the majority of the group deliberation and participation is happening. Right, so this is the mobile phone app that the NGO we developed together. So obviously, it is in Mandarin Chinese on the right for the actual app. So the one on the left is just like English translation. I submitted to UCLA IRB for approval. So you can see here that people can propose projects, discuss on these proposals, and monitor and comment on the implementations. Okay? So actually, this is the first time that participation in digitizing large scale, and United Nations recognized innovation last year. So this is sort of the general intervention. So covers like almost like basically everyone. As long as you have are registered residents in the city of Chengdu, you can use your citizen identification and cell phone number to register an account online. And encouragement design, like even though people have the opportunity to participate, they may or may not participate. So the general estimate, of the average treatment effect is in ITT, and the covering total treated area of 348 townships and villages. And we use the cluster randomization, meaning the unit randomization is the community or village, not individuals within the village, with blocking. So we match the different villages in terms of the GDP per community, distance to the central city, the population, housing price to really increase efficiency randomization. And we have randomly assigned half these communities to an early treatment condition, which they start the intervention in the first half of the year, and the other half to the late treatment condition. They started in the latter half of the year. So this is sort of the step-wise design or waitlist design, right? No matter regardless of how we call it. So the intention is really because every single community has to be treated at some point, right? So the government really want to do this intervention. So this is a way sort of to diplomatically implement randomization while also being able to estimate the average treatment effect. So here also one note is the treatment N is similarly larger than the measured N. So in order to test, right, so how do people think about the global societal authority and justice? So we collected a representative sample of almost 8,000 residents in 39 representative villages. So this is the intervention timeline. As you can see, there are multiple time points. Right? So today I'm going to present the cleanest time points of comparison. The survey wave 1 here, where half the communities are treated and half are not. So this is probably, one of the most labor-intensive experiments I've ever done in my career so far. So we have over 20 survey enumerators who were carefully trained and who went on the street every day to collect the representative sample of 8,000 residents in the city of Chengdu. So here are the outcomes that I'm most interested in. So they're behavioral and attitudinal. So behavior-wise, we are really interested in a whole range of civic engagement items that are not related to budgeting. So ranging from expressing personal views to local government officials and social media, to voting in neighborhood committees, participating in marches, petition, and to some of the universally public goods actions, such as donating blood, donating money, and doing volunteering work. Okay? And attitudinal-wise, again, I'm interested in like how do people think about the local government where they perceive there's a power, delegation of power, right? And the global environment, the global Chinese government where they do not have the equal sense of participation. So very quickly on the general analysis strategy. So the coefficient we are most interested in here is beta 1, indicating average treatment effect. So D is a dummy variable, where 1 refers to treatment, early treatment, where 0 refers to control. And a Z is a vector individual pretreatment characteristics, like gender, age, party affiliation, education, and household income. And G refers to community fixed effect. So importantly, the error term here we assume to be an independent cross, but not within communities. So we use a robust and error cluster at the community level. All right, so here are the main results. So the left panel is the average percentage mean of participation in each of the civic engagement items, and the right side refers to the average treatment effect with 95% confidence intervals. So we can see that basically participatory budgeting intervention increased almost like every single action except for petition and donating blood. So people are more likely to attend policy meetings, reporting to government and media. Small effect size on marches, 0 effects on petition, very marginal, like no effects on donating blood, but pretty sizable effect sizes on donating money and doing volunteering work. Okay? So now these actions were directly allocated in the participatory budgeting domain, but nevertheless, we sort of observed that people are engaging in a range of civic engagement items, so 6 months after the intervention. And one thing, some of you might be thinking, right? So is there any relationship on how big an effect the intervention had on each of these civic engagement items? So this is not pre-registered, like purely explorational. So we asked a separate online panel of Chinese citizens who are not living in Chengdu. So independently ranked the extent to which each of these items pose a sense of personal risk to them. Okay? You probably are guessing a lot of these items are pretty risky to self-report. And we then correlate that these independent panels rated riskiness with the actual effect size of the intervention. And the Spearman's rank order correlation coefficient is really high, it's 0.8. So what it's suggesting is the intervention have really big effect sizes, right, on those universally public goods items, like donating money and doing volunteering work, where the effects on these very risky, marches, right, reporting to government officials, moderate effects and smaller effect sizes on these. And the no effects of a petition, I think it's understandable because the base rate of petition is really low in China, so I'm just guessing we are hitting a floor effect. All right, so the second question, so how did it change, or did it change how people think about the local structure and the global environment? This is the finding. So we reframe the question. On the y-axis is the need for improvement. Basically, the higher the value, the more demand for improvement, or you can also think about lower satisfaction toward the governance. Okay? So what we found here is there's no change in how people think about the local city government. However, there is a significant increase in demand for more improvement on the central government level. Okay? So I find it interesting because, those of you might be thinking about the literature on comparative politics in China. It is very rare, if not impossible, to observe Chinese citizens willing to express critical thoughts or opinions about the central government for a variety of reasons. Okay? So it is interesting to me that, I think there's initial evidence that treatment community members are willing to express their need and maybe raise critical feedback to the central government, potentially correspond to increased level of accountability seeking. At the same time, we also measured people's general perception about the societal outlook. So even though people are more responsive, people express more demand for improvement on the central government, but it does not mean they are totally dissatisfied. Actually, the achievement community members reported a higher level of satisfaction on general policies, more pride as a Chengdu citizen, and reported more positive economic outlook, like on the city and also the country more generally. All right, so implications. I think like this is a really interesting case for me to sort of do a field experiment where there is a field element and a digital element involved, right? So we are pretty much like continue doing that work and even more on the digital side of things. And just like a summary of results, we found that participatory budgeting, when people repeatedly rehearsing having more authority with their local group members, right? So this actually can have a global effect spilling over outside the budgeting domain, influencing a wide range of civic engagement items that are not directly related to budgeting. And we'll also find that achievement community members are more likely to demand or seek more improvement from the central government, which may correspond to a level of more responsive citizenship, right, or more accountability seeking from the central. At the same time, it is accompanied by more positive outlook on the economic outlook in the city and also more pride as a citizen. I think that all these slides sort of bring back to the conversation of what James Mansbridge called a deliberative system. So where discussion and conversation sort of happen outside of formal spaces as informal conversations between citizens and their social representatives, right? So from this result, it seems like when participation is embedded within everyday activities and nested in our local communities, it can indeed have a significant impact on how we think and act, right? Change our behaviors and attitudes more broadly. So when we are invited to discuss and think about collective decisions that impact the welfare of my local communities, simultaneously, people might experience a sense of increased agency and political efficacy. And I really think that digitalization of many of these platforms remove a lot of the access barriers and make the participation and also these voice at a large scale for people. So make it much easier. All right, so as mentioned, it is pretty much still ongoing now that we have the digital platform. And I know like the Hong Kong is also interested in trying something similar. And we're actually building an AI chatbot into the system. So the rough idea is a motivational type of chatbot where, it's more focused on affective side of things versus informational type of chatbot where it's like purely on information about budgeting. And versus a typical like baseline and offline discussion to really tease apart. So what is the mechanism? So what is the most effective, right, in mobilizing people's participation in these voice channels, and whether it is possible to make a sort of, I call it participatory cascade, where people feel empowered, also people feel more agency in having their voice expressed and heard by others. And of course, for all field experiments, as field experimental researchers, we're interested in long-term impacts and also whether it can be conceptually replicated in different contexts outside of China. All right, so I want to thank my collaborators, especially the head of the NGO Social Equity and Participation Center in China, and also all the research assistants and survey enumerators that make this data collection even possible. And I also want to thank our organizers to this conference, Dean and David, and all the administrators. So it's really a wonderful experience. My first time, but feels so welcoming. I'm probably one of the few social psychologists in this crowd, but it has been amazing getting to know all of you and have wonderful conversations on digitalization experiments. And last but not least, thank you for listening.
That was great. Actually, if you could just both join us on stage, and we'll discuss some of this. So yeah, what really cool field experiments? Just to start with you, Sherry. One of the things I was wondering about in terms of some of this mechanism of the effects spilling over from budgeting to other areas. One of the things looking at a participatory budget, I might think is, whoa, there are a lot of constraints here where things are under-resourced, and money could solve these problems, but maybe I could also solve this problem by, say, volunteering. Do you think of that as one of the possible mechanisms for some of these then pro-social behaviors?
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of it is really about the interaction between the different groups members. That is why even there's an AI, but human interactions cannot be replaced. So I think one thing I noticed, or like also talking to the citizens, is a lot of the altruistic type of like thought, perception, attitudes are born out of these budgetary discussions. So realizing, as you said, money cannot solve anything, but they collectively want to make their local communities and neighborhood a better place. So I think that is one of the reasons why we see so much sort of change on those universal public goods, like donating money and doing volunteering work. So I think this is related to something about altruistic, but there's also more broad like empowerment effect, which I think might explain some of the riskier actions like participating like approved marches and expressing views to media. So I think there might be different mechanisms going on that is explaining different items. Purely speculative, I think it might be possible.
Yeah, very interesting. I think just, seeing these two talks back to back, in both of them there's, first there's potential virality in the first, and then the second you were really thinking about doing this kind of clustered design. How did both of you think about the potential for some kind of spillovers happening here, whether that's one treated job market candidate from one institution kind of resulting in more attention maybe to other candidates from that institution, or there being sort of awareness of this participatory budgeting process across these municipal boundaries? What was your thinking on some of those topics? Maybe you first, Jan.
Yeah, I think from our design, it's plausible, but from our design, we actually are not able to tease this apart. About the spillover effects. So let's say a student from Pompier-Fabra got quote tweeted by a prominent behavioral economist, whether other candidates, other job candidates from Pompier-Fabra would also benefit. I guess we can take a look at the data by collecting, assuming that we can get the universal of the 2,700 job candidates outcomes from LinkedIn or other sources. Yeah, if we're able to match, then we can look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could be interesting, especially as you do some of your longer-term follow-ups, to have more of a universe of these outcomes, because at that point it'll be less about interviews and more about the jobs and other outcomes they have.
That's right. Yeah.
But of course, it's always the kind of statistical power we need to detect spillovers. The sample size is often so much more demanding than for the direct effects themselves.
Right.
Yeah. How were you thinking about spillovers and this choice of the level of clustering, et cetera?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think for us, spillover within the cluster is a great thing because it's literally an ambient effect, right? So this general peer effects interaction among people, I think it's really boost the general sort of the treatment of participation. But across different clusters, that's why we did the bipartite matching, so procedure, like making sure that we are sort of not like doing it in a super adjacent communities and like people are not like talking to immediate neighbors, because in the city it's pretty common for people to move across different communities, like neighboring communities, but it's relatively rare for people to move, the super northmost area to the southmost areas. But that is one of the limitations of the experiment, though. There's I don't think we are able to estimate the extent to which there exists a spillover effect across different clusters.
That's just something we and maybe I in particular always get excited about in this context. So I think we're interested in getting questions from the audience. So if you have a question, put your hand up, and there's some mics coming around. I wanted to ask one more question, which is actually thinking about this sort of space of the ethics of the field experiments and some of the constraints you were operating with. I think, Sherry, you mentioned, okay, everyone's got to be included in this process at some point. And obviously there's sort of some questions about that in the context of your experiment. I wonder even in the case of being included eventually, is there any disadvantage imposed on those who came later? Maybe a lot of proposals have already been made. There's kind of rich get richer effects in this platform where they get a lot of upvotes. Do the people who come later end up actually having the same voice in the process? I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a reason to prevent doing an experiment like this, but I wonder if there is still that kind of impact.
Yeah. So you want to start? Or, okay.
You know, I think we are, as experimenters, we are competing with the job market process itself. You know, October to December is a very busy time for job market candidates. And we think that judging from the selected sample we had, people from higher ranked institutions or those who are mentored more are more attuned to these opportunities. So they were actually more likely to sign up. And we also find that they ended up benefiting more. So one way to counteract that, let's say we run the same experiment in another market, we could use this as some, you know, publicizing material, which says that actually participating is beneficial. There was a later field experiment called Adopt a Paper, and they actually explicitly tell everybody that half of you will be randomized into the control and the other half into the treatment. They still get pretty good participation rates. So we could try that strategy if we do this again.
Yeah, so in my case, I think there's a clear advantage of who's doing first rather than later. I'm saying that because the community budgets are pretty fixed by the city government. So this community, how much they get and what they decide does not really interfere with those community who haven't started intervention yet. So it's like totally contained within the local community itself. And also, I'm registered resident in the Jody D. Baylor community. I cannot comment and talk about Qinghe community, that is in the control condition. So it's a relatively little, administrative level interference. Right?
Oh, okay, I see, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, there's not allocation really across Chengdu, but within these
these
zones.
communities.
Oh yeah, so it seems very, very clean. Yeah, very cool. I can't help but think, you know, one of the things we said at the beginning of this conference is we're facing this problem of too many good submissions. And so we only were able to accept 30% this year. We didn't randomize, but we, but there was probably some noise in the process. I won't say that that we somehow were able to choose the exact ideal process. So I wonder, you know, if there's one community that would be happy with us saying we randomized, it should be code, right?
You could randomize at the margin.
Yes, right. Yeah, no, there's all these kinds of great sort of tiebreaker designs that people use in practice, or adding, you know, noise to scores that are used in ranking, right? Yeah, it doesn't have to be sort of unconditional randomization. Cool, I think we have a question over here in the audience.
Yeah.
But it
sounds like more work for me to.
Or less work.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you both for great talks. I had 2 questions for Jan. The first, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but I'm wondering if you have a sense as to why the effects going down the funnel are non-monotone. Like I was not one of the experts, but I too would have predicted that the effect on flyouts would have been larger than the effect on offers, I think. And then I guess insofar as in the year that you ran the experiment, it did seem like the demand for jobs was smaller than the supply of jobs.
Yeah.
That you would imagine that might attenuate your treatment effects, because at least on offers and placements, because everybody is more likely to get a job. I was wondering if you've thought about looking at the rankings of the institutions that people place at. Like you could imagine that there's some difference in the matching dynamics, even if the number of jobs is the same.
Yeah, great questions. So for the first one, our speculation, our conjecture is because of the unraveling of the job market. So in matching market, there was this long tradition of decentralized matching market getting unraveled if there's no central control. So in traditional ASSA markets, the disciplinary device is the 3-day conference that everybody goes to. So all the interviews happen there. But once it goes online, you can interview your job candidates whenever you like. And every year around this time, the secretary of the AEA would send out an email to all members saying, please, the AEA recommends this time window for interviews and flyouts in an attempt to prevent the unraveling. So that year happened to be the first time it unraveled. So our intervention was a little bit late. So I think by the time we started, there were already about 900 interviews being issued. So that was the answer to the first question. For the second question, actually, can you just quickly?
Actually, just to follow up on this first question, which I think is interesting, especially in connection with the prediction, is thinking about to what degree does that end up being a severe test of the knowledge of the people doing the predictions? To the degree that they did or did not have information about this market unraveling, that maybe when you presented the field experiment to these experts, you described it in maybe a stylized way that suggested that these posts were going to occur before it unravels. And so one of the things I just think about there is how it's kind of challenging when things sort of go awry in a field experiment to interpret the predictions produced by experts. When did they make those predictions and how much information did they have?
We described the experiment and we described essentially the treatment and the intervention. And I think you're right that they probably based off of the predictions on the previous year's statistics. Actually, it only occurred to us after we saw the result to go back to econjobmarket.org to look at the CDFs of time offers and realize that it unraveled. The market unraveled.
And I think the other question was about ranking and whether that might be a more sensitive thing in the case of this, what was a very good market for econ PhDs that year.
Yeah, so we do have a result, which is not significant, which is the treated groups are 19 percentage points more likely to end up in top 30 institutions. But it's significant at the p-value was like 0.11. So we were underpowered, yeah.
Very interesting. We got another one here.
Hi, this is a question for Yan. Do you think that the effect size, where maybe the non-moneticity speaks to this, but do you have a sense of whether the effects were because of like just awareness of the candidates or like validation, like, oh, I saw this person on, reposted by that person? Do you have any sense of that?
So we don't know the cognitive mechanism. So what we do have is the mechanism exploration that we did. So those who are randomly assigned into, it's attention. Okay, so you're randomly assigned to a high reach influencer. So these are people like Justin Woofers who tweet on average 6 times a day during that time period. You're actually worse off than someone who are assigned to a low reach influencer who tweets on average twice a day. So I'm going to use the example of Matt Jackson, who was not one of our influencers. So Matt is on Twitter, or was on Twitter. When he tweets, I get an email notification. I actually would go and look at what he tweeted because he doesn't tweet as often. When Justin tweets, he's my colleague. If I missed it, okay, I missed it. I'll catch him another time because he tweets all the time. So I think it's competing attentions. So that might be, I think attention story is probably the most likely, yeah.
I mean, that highlights some of the challenges in terms of this randomization in the assignment to influencers that, there's some variation there, even if you were to have randomized, but a lot of the characteristics of these influencers were really correlated in some complex bundle of ways. The more influential ones are also pumping out more information. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, we've got Ruru. Yeah.
Sorry to follow up on this again, but I think I'm just trying to reconcile this non-monotonicity. And you mentioned very briefly that the take-up rate was like 88% or something like that. So do you think that could be that like the influencers are sort of screening out the like less good candidates, right, based on unobservables? So maybe those 12%, it's like you're actually filtering out some like quality, right, which would reconcile with these thoughts that, like, maybe you don't see this showing up in interviews, but you see it showing up in flyouts and potentially, the higher ranking results.
So we did check observable characteristics between the pre and the post sample, and I think parental income class category are different, and there was another characteristics, and so we did control for all of these in our regression analysis. And
I guess the question is more like, if they can read the job market papers
we're talking about the
beforehand.
compliance rate, right? Why only 88% of the job market papers were actually quote tweeted? That was your question, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So we don't have evidence of systematic difference between those who are dropped versus those who are not. But the late estimate is very similar to the ITT. I think it's attention. I get usually about 100 emails a day, and if I miss some and they drop down from the first page, and then it could be months before I read them. Sorry.
Thanks for accepting our invite here. I think actually there's a lot more we could say about this, but we're actually a little bit behind schedule, and so I just want to really thank Jan and Sherry for sharing these super cool field experiments.
Thank you for organizing.